Robert Vandervoort is a founder, solutions architect, and advocate for ethical, human-centered AI. Through VDV Labs, he helps organizations think more carefully about accessibility, governance, and how to embed AI in ways that create real business value without losing sight of people. His work is shaped by a deep commitment to empathy, high agency thinking, and making space for underrepresented perspectives in technology. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to picking your brain. So, if I could just sort of start a little bit by perhaps if you could share a bit about your background, what path led you into technology, and ultimately into founding VDV Labs.
Yeah. How long do we have?
Yeah, no, it's a big question for the first
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
No. And I think, and for me, it's kind of like one of the biggest, most important things in who I am is really where I came from. And I think that probably stands for anybody. But fun anecdote, after my father passed away in 2018, I found some of his old business cards, as well as, about 40 years of canceled checkbooks and other stuff. But I didn't realize this, and he never really explained it this way, but he actually did the exact same thing that I do. Well, not the AI part, but he was a solutions architect actually, at ITT and later on for AT&T and Lucent and so on. So I thought that was kind of crazy. I just never knew that the whole entire time. But yeah, so I grew up around technology. I was the third grader that could explain to you how a transistor worked, right? And I got it too. And there's a difference between regurgitating information and really kind of getting it. I was the very curious kid. Once I discovered how a screwdriver worked, just about everything in the house came apart. Luckily for my parents, I should say that my dad worked in consumer electronics side of AT&T. So he was always bringing me home, like, broken fax machines, phones, you name it, right? He's like, here, take this apart. Like, leave the microwave alone. Like, take this stuff apart. So just a really curious nature. I was always the smartest kid in the room, if you will, in school. And the funny thing is, like, that actually served me poorly, very poorly. I kind of knew the answer to everything until I was maybe in 4th or 5th grade. And that gave me this mindset of, like, I just know all the stuff, right? So I never really studied anything. I always asked tons of questions. I was always like very interested. Mm-hmm. And that's what got me where I was. Once it got to the point where we were actually doing like real math and stuff like that, well, guess what? I kind of fell on my face. Anecdotally, in high school, I failed Algebra 1 twice. But I got A's in geometry, and the math teachers were confounded, right? Everybody told me, oh, you're just bad at math. Well, then I went on to college. I was Dean's List student. I was tutoring finite. So I guess I'm not bad at math. No. And so one of the things that I guess where I'm going with this is that, for anybody out there that has ADHD, first of all, I got to plug this book, ADHD 2.0. No, I did not write it. It's from the authors that wrote Driven to Distraction, which was kind of like the original manual on ADHD in the 90s, right? And even in the 90s, really very little was known contemporarily about ADHD. It was just kind of one of those, hyper kids, they bounce off the wall, right? Oh, don't give them sugar, right? Which, I mean, we know now is total BS. Maybe sugar's not bad. Sugar's not good anyway, but right? Yes, don't give them sugar anyway. But so I always heard, like, oh, you're so smart. If only you just apply yourself. Oh, it's such a pity that if you could just pay attention and sit down and do your work, you do great. You'll go far in this world if you can just, on and on and on. And they weren't wrong, right? But when you hear that constantly as a kid, you unconsciously develop this, well, I'm broken, right? I don't want to say you do anything, right? Everybody reacts to things differently. My path was, F it, I'm broken. Like, I'm smart, but obviously I'm stupid because failing school, I can't do this, I can't do the other thing, so on, so on, so on. People tell me this stuff all the time. And so I kind of fell in with the quote unquote bad crowd, right? I was kind of classified as a behavior problem. And unfortunately, back in the 80s and 90s, that meant that you were kind of all lumped in the same group, right? And they always say, like, you are, birds of a feather flock together, all that kind of stuff. Through high school, I had a lot of legal issues, drugs, all that stuff, right? Nothing hard, right? But it was basically just like, screw school. I'm going to hang out with my friends and smoke pot and listen to music and go to concerts and chase girls. And that really distracted from my development, obviously. I want to say that it probably helped me a little bit on the social side. I am as, and there's a lot of things I don't like saying just because it feels very, I don't know, boasty or whatever. But when I was in second grade, I scored 147 on the Wechsler intelligence scale, right? The WISC version, the kids version. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously my brain works pretty well, at least if I can sit down and take a test long enough. Back then, I don't think my ADHD was in high gear, so I actually could sit down and take a test. Although they booted me out of gifted and talented because I wasn't doing the work and sitting down. So add another coffin nail, right? So that really shaped a lot of it, right? And I thought I was like a failure. I ended up at 20 years old, basically, 19, on the street. And my dad had moved. Our relationship was totally in the toilet, because of my just continued failure and stuff. And, but I was happy about it. I was like, finally, I'm going to have somebody nagging me. I'm an adult. I'm on the street. But I was kind of on the street, right? And I was couch surfing, going from friend's house to friend's house, could never really hold a job. And pile this on, by the way. So I know we had talked about it a little bit before, but I'm also legally blind. Mm. Now, what that means in America is that your vision is no better than 2200 in either eye corrected. I sit at about 2240, 2400. So for those of you who do not know what that means, it means what you could see at 400 feet, I can see at 20 feet in my left eye, and at 240 at 20 feet, right? So it's pretty bad. People are just like, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? And well, you'd be surprised the amount of the world you can get away with navigating and working through not having great vision, right? Yeah. So anyway, and no, there's no surgery and no glasses and no whatever that can fix that. I get that all the time too. Right. Oh, have you seen an eye doctor?
Does it get progressively worse, or is it's where it is?
It is. It's a condition. It's pretty rare. They say it's less than 0.1% of people have. It's called optic nerve atrophy. Okay. And basically there's just something wrong between my eyes and my brain, and they don't know what. It could have been some sort of structural deformity, but it really happened, not all at once. It happened a lot when I was about 11, really kind of just early onset of puberty. So it probably had some sort of structural change in my head or something. And basically it cuts off nerve signal. And because there's not enough signal, those nerves just die. Well, and it happens really quickly. In fact, I know it's a bit of a tangent on a classic Robert move. But the visual cortex is actually so active and so plastic that one of the current theories right now about why we dream is so the visual cortex doesn't get hijacked by just other brain processes, because you have no input while you're sleeping, right? Yeah. So that's really interesting theory. So anyway, just fast forward a little bit, right? And I've always been working with technology. I've always had a computer. From back in the early days, the AT&T 6300, x86, like old 8086, 6 megahertz or whatever it was, on and on. My first job was in a computer store. I had to stay in the back room because it turns out it wasn't legal for me to be working in the state of Louisiana at 12 years old. Whatever. It was a great summer. Actually, I got to meet the guys that developed Castle Wolfenstein, the original 3D first-person shooter, which was pretty neat. Yeah. And I didn't know anything then, but then now it's an awesome story. And then kind of just progressed into just doing my own thing. I've always kind of just done my own thing, built engines, worked on motorcycles, like anything I could it was just me and a thing that wasn't people I could do great with, right? But then, like I said, in adulthood, when it came time to actually rubber hit the road, that was where the issues were, right? And, I wish earlier on, bringing this back to empathy, right? If people would have had a little bit more empathy, they would probably have asked me just like, why can't you sit still? Why can't you pay attention? And the simple answer would have been because I'm bored, or because I think this is dumb, right? I think that this thing that I'm doing in class, I've done it 15 times. I get it. This is dumb. I want to do something else, right? But things aren't built that way, right? Things are made for the other 28 people in the classroom, not for the one or two, right? Yeah. And the drawbacks of that are we end up in that ADHD 2.0 book. There's a lot of great stats in there. Talk about the degree of criminality that exists in, or I should say, the degree of ADHD that exists in criminality. It's astonishingly high. And everybody that I knew who I was getting in trouble with were all really bright people. Like, I mean, if there was anybody I'd want to have over at dinner to have a great conversation with, it would be any of them, hands down. Right.
Yeah.
Assuming they're not in jail right now. I don't.
Yeah. When on break. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just kind of like the early thing, I guess, so I just always been steeped in technology, always been interested in it. There was never a problem I couldn't fix. It was always just, if I couldn't figure it out, there was the user manual, right? Remember we had books, didn't have Google back then.
Huge thick manuals for anything simple. Yeah.
Yeah. But I know I've been on a bit. I guess, did that kind of just give you a little bit of an entree into kind of like how I really got into technology overall?
Yeah. It gives me a view of how it's probably the wrong word, how you're wired in a way. So how you come at things, how you think about things.
I haven't figured that one out yet.
It's interesting because a lot of what you said sort of resonates. I remember when I was at school, I think half my school year was spent at a desk sitting in the corridor outside the classroom. So I disrupted the classroom, and it was very, very similar. It wasn't any malintent or on my behalf. I wasn't trying to. It just wasn't interested in probably how they were teaching me. I wasn't able to learn the way they taught me. So I didn't enjoy school at all. But then subsequent to school, I sort of gone back and done a couple of master's degree and a PhD. So wasn't that I was stupid. It's just that education system it worked for the 28, not for the 29th. And obviously I'm older than you, so that's ADHD, ADD, all those things, they weren't talked about at all then. It was just about disruptive. That was the label that we all sort of all clung to and got tagged with, really. So from that part of your life, how did you come to connect so deeply with AI? When did AI first appear?
So for me, AI first appeared in like 2022. Now I know it's been around. People are always, AI's been around for a long time. But not in the same
format now.
Not in the public, the big public eye. It's all like LLMs and generative. Yeah. That's what everybody knows is AI. But it came about for me because I'd started as a solutions engineer, architect, sales engineer. They all have a lot of different titles in 2012, and it was when I was working on a help desk doing operations. I was doing some SharePoint administration, some development work. And the company whose tool I had used, this company Idera for SQL performance tools, they're like, hey, did you, we really liked the way that you handled our sales engineer in that sales meeting. You ever thought about doing that? And I was like, I don't know anything about that job. Like, I've never even heard about it until you just said it, right? And like, I know there's guys that go and explain stuff, but I just never heard of it. And he's like, well, yeah, he's like, you were kind of a jerk, he's like, but you weren't wrong. Like, you asked a lot of really important questions, right? Yeah. And those questions you asked were basically like, who cares kind of questions. And in sales, who cares is everything, right? Mm-hmm. If I go in and just show a product to a customer and they don't care what I'm showing them, then guess what? I'm probably never going to be talked to again. They're definitely not going to buy it unless they were already looking for it, right? And so I was like, yeah, let's talk, right? I was about to take a job at one of the local universities here in Houston, and I was going to be the compliance admin over 40-something applications. And compliance is complex for one application. You throw 40 in there, I'm like, wow, I'm going to have a really busy time. And the pay kind of sucked, right? Just, pulled no punches there. It's education, whatever. I loved my uni days, but man, working there is a different story. And so they were dangling that carrot, and I was like, wow, I can make like almost 40% more, like not having to do that. I'm only going to work on SharePoint product. Like, okay, let's try this out. And it turns out like I was pretty good at it, right? Mm-hmm. He said that one of the hard things about finding a good solutions engineer is somebody who can still speak people, right? And also understand the technical side. So that's what got me into that. And then just after years of doing performance tools, I got bored of it, right? And I was just like, I got to do something faster paced. Cisco, love the company, but it's an 80,000 person company. So, things move like 80,000 person companies do quite often. And I wanted something a little more fast. And so that's probably the ADHD talking. And so I went and took a little time off, and then I went to work for a company called Moveworks, which was acquired fairly recently by ServiceNow. And so Moveworks was what I just absolutely adored about it was meant for employee experience. trying to give employees, I mean, this is mind blowing right now, right? It's just like, we're all talking about, oh, how can we replace people with AI? That's paraphrased, right? Heavily paraphrased. But this was all about the, hey, I need access to this piece of software. Why does it take 4 days? Like when my job depends on it, why does it take 4 days for me to get a license for this? Right? Yeah. You just got to go in somewhere, click it, turn it on, give it to Robert. Okay, good. But it's just because you got to file the form. Somebody's got to see the form. It sits in a queue. If you're offshore, it could be somebody's on a different time zone, right? If I'm doing it at 4 a.m., the people who look at it are asleep, right? So I got to wait another day and so on. So I was just thrilled having had that experience, right? Having worked on that help desk, having answered so many of those questions with, did you turn it off and turn it back on again? Did you wiggle the monitor cable out with your foot? Can you check? If I had $1 for every time I heard that, I would have a good investment again. But yeah, so that was really how I got into there. And we were stitching together so much technology now and what you can do in a single model. Like the idea of tool use didn't exist. Like it wasn't even it was in people's imagination, but it wasn't a thing. Right? So that was very fascinating. Had a reduction in force there because we thought we would grow a little bit faster than we did. And then after I left, they grew really fast. Maybe it was my fault. But that was my first time as a people manager too. So it was it's pretty interesting. They were trying to grow to that $100 million mark, and I had definitely experienced that at AppDynamics, Cisco. So I brought a lot of that, I guess, bigger corporate practice. How do we do the sales play? What is med pick, right? Why does that matter to big organizations? So.
And then when did, and this is not to say there was a time when it didn't, but when did thoughts around ethical AI and human-centric AI implementation, when did that become something that engaged you?
Yeah, I mean, so everybody that knows me knows I'm like a diehard Trekkie. And, I love that. I love most of the idea of that future. One second. Got my radio voice on. Excuse me. So yeah, I love the idea of that future. If anything, the idea of Starfleet might be in some ways a little fascist, right? And it's like, we don't have money. Everybody does their job. Fall in line, if you're Starfleet, right? Yep. What about the other folks that aren't part of that? I don't know, right? But robots, automation does stuff and freeing people up to do, to live their best lives, as they say, right? So that sounds great. It's the getting there part I think is painful. We can definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
But I've always thought of things like, how do I do this thing in a way that doesn't just benefit me? Any of the software that I build, there's really anything. I try to make everything better, right? My wife always would give me hell about, why is it like before you sell a car, you go and fix all this stuff? Like you're just wasting money. I was like, but I don't want it to fail for the other person. I don't want them to be like, damn that Robert, he sold me this car and it broke down. I don't want to be connected with that kind of energy or something, not to be too woo woo, but so I've always thought of it that way. And that's why I was so excited to work at Moveworks, because they were literally the mission was making things easier and smoother for the people who you pay to work for you. That was great. Right. So I guess it's just kind of always been a thing for me. And it's definitely something that keeps me up at night now.
It's funny, isn't it? 'Cause it often feels a lot of time with technology, and I use the word advisedly, solutions, almost as soon as you buy it, install it, you're on the phone to them asking for a new upgrade or a new this, or no, we haven't. Oh no, you didn't realize you needed to buy the 7.6.4.2 program. That's another $100 a month. It almost seems a lot of the companies, without naming names, feels like once it's embedded in your systems, it becomes very sticky, doesn't it? And you don't want to keep putting in a new CRM system every week or a new whatever. You have to sort of buy into the latest, greatest sort of tech. So it does feel, and it sounds crazy, but almost anomalous that having an ethical perspective on technology almost shouldn't be seen as being unusual, but it does feel unusual in where we are today.
It doesn't always serve me. I mean, it's I could definitely have a different perspective and be more successful at what I do. But I don't know. I can sleep a lot easier, I guess, knowing that I'm trying to do the right thing. It's just they say you can't teach empathy. right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, not sounding sexist, men, sorry, but I would say women are probably a little naturally better at it.
Yeah. I'd agree
Any
with that.
female salespeople or solutions engineers I've known have almost unequivocally been very successful,
Yeah.
right? Because they start the meeting out not with like sports team weather. It's like, how's your kid? Oh, how did he do at that band, contest, blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm always like, how did you know about their kids' band practice? Like, and it turns out like, they talk to the customer on the weekends and so on and so on. And so like, that just shows that they actually just care. Like they're interested, either genuinely interested or they're great at faking it. Right.
Yeah.
But what that kind of results in is like someone who listens, right? If you come into a customer, in the back of your mind, this is what I sell, right? Like as a solutions engineer, I know what we sell. I know how it works. I know what it can do. I know what it's bad at. I know why I don't want to sell certain things, right? And then that arms me with the kinds of questions, and not even like leading, like I want to ask you this so that you say yes. So they go, oh, well then look at my product. It's just, what are the problems that we're trying to solve? Like there's only certain things I can solve with what I sell, what's on the truck. So I want to hear about your pain. And then at the end of the day, I'll let you know if like it makes sense, right? It doesn't make sense to solve. And like, to be real, I know this isn't the sales podcast, but that makes things a lot easier to sell. It makes decisions a lot easier to make. I think I was at a executive training at Stanford recently, and they said, you don't have to be the best. You just have to be the easiest decision to make.
Yes.
Right?
I 100%. Yeah. It's really interesting. So I've been on the receiving end of a lot of pitches. I've had to give a lot of pitches, and certainly when I'm receiving a pitch, I can generally tell very quickly when somebody starts the pitch off by telling me how they're the number one company in their space, they have 100,000 employees, they have headquarters here. When they spend 10 minutes telling me about themselves, I can pretty much know that's not going to be the pitch that's going to win.
Yep.
The ones that come in and say, hey, so we spent some time, talked to some of your team, we sort of spoke to some of your managers, went to some of your stores, and here's what we've learned. Tell us where we're wrong. What is it you need from us? They're the ones that actually want to engage in the conversation, not the ones that, because I know how big you are, and otherwise you wouldn't be pitching to me. I know that you can do the job, I know all these things, but fundamentally, what is it that you understand about me that's going to make this relationship more powerful? No, I 100%. And it's amazing how many big companies still lead with telling me how big they are. Just okay. Well, yeah, I'll almost want to say that I'll take that as given, but no, they still need to go through their spiel. Really, you said something earlier on about people thinking about AI as a sort of a cost driver. So I think of AI, I guess, in two ways. One is efficiency AI, which is doing the same with less. So I can get rid of headcount, get rid of resource, and I can do the same amount of business with less spend. So I'm going to get more profitability. Or there's opportunity AI, which to me is about how a business can do more with a little bit more. And I wondered where you sit on the distinction between AI helping replace or support us on tasks versus AI replacing roles. Because I very much, without giving the answer away, I very much sit on the former. I guess the AI is very, very good at doing tasks, lots of very repetitive tasks, it's brilliant at. But in terms of AI fully replacing roles, it feels a little bit less clear.
Yeah. Okay. So this can go a lot of ways. I like to think about things like very simply, honestly. And they can be very complex. Like the whole picture of it is complex. It's not complicated, but it's complex in that it has a lot of pieces, a lot of moving parts, lots of variables, and then you throw people in the mix, right? And so that's where it gets hairy. But I guess the short of it is that if you look at any company, pretty much, right? We'll just afford me that generalization, right? Any company is built to optimize its profit, right? So especially if you're a public company, especially, right? Private companies, you can have complete lunatic running it and be like running it into the ground or whatever. That's fine. But if you've got a board and you have a stock ticker, you can't do that. It could be your company. They don't like what you're doing. Board, sorry, CEO, bye, right? Even though you might be a majority shareholder, right? So we have this cost optimization algorithm that goes on. And because of that, it drives behavior, right? So if we think about like what you're talking about, the efficiency side of things, how do we do more with less? Well, really AI is actually pretty expensive, right? And trust me, I sell it. But when you look at it kind of long term, right? Is it what I'm turning OpEx into CapEx, or I'm switching salaries and payroll and benefits and sick time and all this other kind of stuff, and I'm dumping that into my operational expense budget if I'm in the cloud and so on, right? Those things look really good, right? And I think if anything, if you from some of the companies I've seen in the news recently where they're like, oh, we've laid off so many people to focus on AI, da 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 da. I think honestly, some of that messaging isn't genuine. I think some of that is like companies that are hiding behind a balance sheet that's not really where it needs to be. So they're rebalancing it so that their stock doesn't drop and confidence doesn't wane. But really the reality of it is you can run an entire company on AI. There are actually AI companies. People have done really kind of just as an experiment, right? One runs a shop, an actual brick and mortar store in San Francisco selling, kind of random things. But, I don't know if it's successful right now, but it exists. And there's multiple projects, done by some, pretty awesome, amazing people, Stanford and other places where there's an entire research lab that runs in some containers. You can tell it, hey, we want to cure cancer, right? And it will spin up thousands of agents to go and do research and experiments and come up with all these novel compounds and so on that we can test in the real world. We can talk about that a little more too, because I think that's, if I was going to classify like what is a good and bad use of AI, like if I'm going to heat up my planet, what's a good reason to do that, right? That's medicine's probably a pretty good reason, especially if it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, which it does sometimes. But so there's that, right? You have, that's a cost optimal thing. Then you have like the improvement side, which is like, well, we're using AI so my customer can have a better experience, right? And most of the time that is contact center, right? It's, the customer calls in. Well, we don't want them to call in. Well, companies haven't wanted you to call in for decades, right? People are expensive. They don't necessarily get the right answers. Who knows if the end result is good or not? So, hey, if we can replace that with a chat bot, that's like the first thing they did really was, we're going to offshore, then we're going to chat bot the offshore so that we can get smaller contracts. But again, it fits back into that cost optimization model. Whereas I just want to spend less, and it's not less to do more. See, I think that's a logical fallacy. I think it's almost like evolution, right? Evolution, when Darwin said survival of the fittest, I think that's really a misspeak, right? It's survival of the at least good enough to reproduce. And when you really look at it from evolutionary biology, something I studied in college, and then in psychology, actually my degree's in psychology, not computer science. No, that wasn't a cop-out soft option. It was because I could never figure out really how people work. Computers have manuals, and you can sit down and figure it out, right? More deterministic. But I think that's the fallacy, right? Is that it's not do more with less. It's at least do good enough that our sales don't go down or our stock price doesn't go down. How do we optimize that? And I think that's where those bad decisions get made. And when I say bad decisions, the bad decisions are things that impact human beings negatively, right? The rest of us human beings. Let's put it that way, right? Now, do I like it when my customer service call is offshored to some company who really doesn't care and does also just good enough so that they don't lose the contract? No. In fact, I'm surprised and blown away when I call a company, somebody at the company actually answers the phone. Like, that's weird. Like, if I don't have to hit a prompt menu before somebody answers the phone, that's amazing. And those people are usually very happy people. I don't know if you've had this experience, but they're usually nice. They're not trying to in a rush to get it. I have literally had, if you can't tell because I like to go on, I've had like 30, 40-minute conversations that, 5 minutes of it was about what we wanted, and then we just BS'd. Right. This one lady is like a wedding planner, and she's planning this big wedding, and she's kind of freaking out over this and that. And
I like that.
Yeah. But it's awesome. I mean, this is so that if we can use AI so that we can have more of that, more like people to people time, more quality time, more quality experiences, I think that's where we need to place the dollars. Right. So if you're a company, you're selling a thing, listen to me now. It's not, it's about your NPS score, the net promoter score. It really should be more about that than your stock price. If you can make it easier to use your product, if you can make customer service more seamless, right? You don't need to get rid of people. You know, there are solutions out there in call center that will actually using retrieval augmented generation that listen to the call and will continually prompt the agent with information they might need. So instead of that, can you hold for a moment? You know, it's right there, right? But it's still the person handling it. And I guess the cynic will say, well, that's just because like they don't trust the AI and so on, right? And there is a lot of that. There is a lot of that what we call human in the loop, where something happens, prompt the human. What does the human want to do? Now, I will say from the evil AI technologist, if you're not using that as training data to improve that system, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But you're also basically training your replacement. And that, I mean, as a human, that feels bad, you know, and I can't get my mind over the mindset as well. And you talk about the difference between like academics and corporate and so on. Like there's definitely a very different mindset there. My experience with Stanford professors was great. I mean, these are very brainy people. They're also kind of isolated. Like academia is a different place than the real world, right? I don't want to be like, oh, ivory tower, right? But a little bit, right? And that the one comment was that, well, farmers were upset when they invented the tractor, right? And this is just like the tractor. I'm like, well, no, because that was just farming, right?
Yeah.
This literally impacts everyone except like custodians, right? We don't have there's no robot that's cleaning toilets and stuff yet. Oh, we do have ones that do the floors.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. I'd be happy if my trash can drove itself to the street. I'd be fine with that. You know?
Yeah, it is a tedious task, isn't it? No matter how proud you are, you still got to empty your trash into the street and let them. Our trash came out today, so yeah, no, it is front of mind. A couple of things in that, and something you mentioned before actually, that I think has sort of happened at least in the media narrative in the last few months, that the cost of AI is becoming more of a topic. I think a lot of people perhaps listening will think of AI and they'll think of their sort of $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever. That's $20 a month. That's not very much, is it? But I found, and I sort of have probably like most people, a couple of Mac Minis sitting here with a couple of agents spinning up, whatever. Wow, you can tear through tokens pretty quickly. And before you know it, it's like, okay, so that's a couple of $1,000 I haven't expected to spend. Because we're sort of learning how to use the agents, learning how to agents use one another, learning how, and once they set off the leash, I'm sure we can restrict them. But I think there was a discussion a few months ago about how can AI ever become profitable if people are only paying $30 a month, whatever. I think now we're seeing, actually, okay, it's all about token use, really. How do we get companies to use more tokens? So AI. So I guess the question is AI as cheap as we think it is?
No. Well, God, I hate the word cheap. Just like I hate the word expensive. I think I like the word costly.
Cost effective?
Costly is a good, okay. Cost effective, sure. The reason is because like cheap is a perception, so is expensive, right? If I've heard a customer millions of times either talking about my or another product, they say, well, that's too expensive. And that all that signals to me as a solutions engineer who works in sales is that you don't see that the value of the thing that we're talking about is equal to or greater than what you're paying for, right?
Yeah.
To your point, right? And I know I don't think go long about that, but I think it's important that people just keep that in mind, right? So, what are the costs? Well, number one, we've got just within the last let's go with 6 months, we've seen the price of memory go through the ceiling. Yeah. Right. And I like to show folks, if you go to PC Part Picker, one of my favorite websites for building computers, because you can just select all the parts that should be compatible, right? And kind of build the shopping cart, and it shows you where you can find the cheapest price. But what it also does is it also tracks prices of things. So if you can go in there, you can add like a typical server, what they're called RDIMMs. They're just memory module, right? 64 gigabytes, 128, whatever. You can put those in there and then look at that price. And it was flat for like a few years, pretty much. And then it's more than 300%. It's crazy. The reason for that is because, if you weren't aware, maybe listeners care or not, AI has essentially soaked up the stock of manufacturing capacity. Not so much the product, but because memory that's used in AI is 12 layers of chip, right? And that's about to be 16. And the failure rate for assembling things in 3 dimensions at that scale is pretty high. Yeah. So there's a lot of waste. So in the whole cost effective, it all kind of starts there. That's like creating that kind of memory is not cost effective, but they can sell it like it's unicorn tears, right? Companies are willing to pay it. It's like have money, right? We don't like it, but have money. Yeah. So that's one of the major cost drivers. And when I think about cost, also it's, how are these data centers run? Many of them, we talk about water usage and things like that. And I think this is honestly more important that we need to talk about these things than the cost of a server, right? Or the cost of memory or GPUs or what the specs are on it, whatever. But, it's millions and millions and millions and millions, probably billions of gallons of water a day that are being, quote, used. And people will ask, well, how does a computer use water? Right? Well, they use it because those data centers make the decision, and this is a conscious decision, to use what's called evaporative cooling. It works a lot in the ways that like a nuclear power plant works, where you see the big, funnel-shaped cooling tower, and you just essentially run water across the thing, and then the air takes it, evaporates it, takes the heat energy, puts it out into the sky, creates clouds. Right? We're making clouds with AI, people. The cloud is real. But that's a decision, right? So that can be done with what's called like water to water, right? Where you have water, or it's really coolant in the cooling plates. It goes to another radiator, blows air across it. Air is a poor conductor, which is why they don't do it. Right? You have to have really big radiators in order to move the heat. You never physics, right? You're never cooling something. You're just moving heat. Yeah, taking away from one place, but so it's got to go somewhere, right? There's folks that are like, oh, we can build data centers in the ocean because the ocean is a great heat sink. It's like, okay, great, but what about the fish? Well, you can heat up the ocean. Okay. Like, oh, we'll put them in northern Russia, in Siberia, where energy is almost free, and it's just open the windows, right? Well, yes, you can do that, but then you're heating up the tundra, right? So and that's just humans being myopic, which that's kind of where most of us live, right? Is in like, this is my bubble. This doesn't affect me. I don't know or ask anything about it. Hey, look at the funny picture I made on Instagram, So if I could encourage folks to like, don't do that. Like I see it all the time, and it's a little aggravating. I get that it's efficient. I get it's cool. It's funny, whatever, but like there's a cost in doing that. And it's not just your bill with Anthropic or Grok or whoever you pay for that. And even running it on a Mac Mini. I mean, yeah, maybe I don't know if that's better, honestly. It's more distributed.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you can use solar to do it, maybe it's a little less bad, right? But it's still heat that's staying on the planet, or where we need to go the opposite direction, honestly. And I know that was not probably where you wanted me to go with that.
No. Just for another point. So I use Claude as my sort of model of choice, I guess. And I was reading yesterday, and I had to double check. They signed a deal with SpaceX, so they're going to double the usage that Pro and Max users get because of the deal they've done with Grok, etc. And I thought sort of Dario and Elon were at fairly opposite ends of the spectrum, but they seem to have sort of got together on this deal. So they're going to create more capacity, which again is going to create more usage and more demand, whatever. And I don't know whether that's a clever play by SpaceX to push data centers in space, which sounds like a TV program. Data centers in space, but that does feel like we could get there in. I know it might be sort of 5, 6, 7, 10 years away, but yeah, that feels like a real possibility. So it gets away from some of those heating issues that you sort of talked about. But
but does it? Because like, how much heat does a rocket make pushing that kind of out to space?
I guess it's how long, how do you maintain them, and lots of other things. But yeah,
right. And then what happens to them when they come back down? Right, because everything that goes up must come down. Satellites break up in orbit, but what about a data center with 100,000 GPUs in it? All of that heavy metal and all that kind of stuff just basically gets dispersed through the atmosphere. Or, I mean, you can plunge it into the ocean, right? But
Yeah, and then one of the other challenges is that obviously data centers and the chips, they have a huge demand for precious metals and things, and and access to those is quite difficult. They tend to be in places where Russia, China, lots of places where it's difficult to have a relationship. So it does become a very powerful bargaining tool for a country to have ownership of that sort of space, I guess. Bringing it back a little bit, we've gone a long way, which is good, which I'm enjoying. But bringing it back to business, two things, I guess, and one follows on the other. So when you talk to companies about bringing AI into their business, what do you find that companies either get wrong in how they decide to bring AI in versus those that successfully embed AI in their business? What's the fundamental difference, and how do you approach that when you have those conversations with people?
No, that's a great question. It's not easy. Just the whole conversation is not easy. I think the biggest battle is the my idea principle, right? Or somebody's got an idea, and sometimes people don't, right? And that the more common scenario I've seen with companies that aren't really operationalizing AI, like the healthcare companies, like they all get it. Healthcare, finance, banking, like they've been doing it for a while. They're actually pretty mature most of the time, right? With most things that are more deterministic that involve AI. But for companies that don't, right? Like your average companies that are not in those sectors, they have a board that is on a hype train that says like AI, we're all going to die if we don't do AI. And then some people are you're going to die if you do AI. All right, well, which one do you believe? I think there's been a lot of that kind of panic, right? Where it's like, you're going to get run over by people with AI. I mean, you probably heard it too, right? Every different permutation of if you're not using AI, you're going to be screwed soon, right? So the board say that, CEOs, C-level folks go, board says we got to do something with AI. We got to do something with AI. And then they talk to their directs and say, hey, you got to do something with AI. And I've literally heard the company says we have to have 7 AI projects this financial year. And I'm like, 7? Why not 8? How about 14?
Why not 6?
Right? Yeah. Why 7? And then when you get down a few levels, then it's like, the open question is like, what AI initiatives do you have? Which I just don't like asking that. But if they answer, it's like, well, I heard the other day, we have 470 something AI initiatives, and we're trying to whittle it down to 24, right? And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
You probably should have 24 you're trying to whittle down to 2, right? Yeah. It's like you got to start, because that's an easy way to not to be successful right off the gate. And there's that stat that came out earlier this year, which was real. And the funny thing, they actually changed the stat because it made people too uncomfortable. But it was that 90% of companies who are doing some sort of Gen AI initiative fail, like never makes it to production. But that is true. I can tell you that from my observation. Now, not quantitatively, I'm not counting numbers, but I've seen a lot of things that are put out there that fail. And it's mostly because there was no good business reason, right? So where those 400 things come from is they come from people like me being frustrated with something I do that's frustrating or drudgery or something like, hey, if I could just automate this, right? And so because that chain goes down saying like, hey, what are you guys doing with AI? We got to do something with AI, on down to the ICs, individual contributors, right? They're like, oh, if we could just automate this thing with this workflow submission or this forms processing thing or whatever, right? That would be great. Not realizing that that's a large part of their job, right? So danger. But then a lot of the times the underlying system is bad. I would say if that forms processing workflow is so painful and so just awful and slow and requires all this touch or whatever, the process probably isn't good, right? So maybe that's just process improvement. And especially many times, a lot of these things, because in larger enterprises, you've got, the SAP, right? The big monstrosity. SP is great. And what it does, it's very powerful, but it's a big interconnected web. So I can't just go change something in procurement and expect that not to have knock-on effects literally for the customer getting a thing in the mail, right? For instance, on physical products. So, and that's hard. Honestly, every company is pretty siloed. There's very few companies that are very flat. I would say that the Elon companies are pretty flat. Tesla has on average between an IC to Elon, it's like 2 people in front of them, right? You better make the right decision.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, that's not really necessarily a bad thing, right? You just got to you got to be careful. You got to make informed decisions. You have to be taking the temperature and running the numbers and all that kind of stuff. You really got to be on your game, right? And you can't really punt in those flat organizations. It's hard to punt responsibility off, right? Anyway, I can go off on a long one there, but bringing it home, right? It's okay. Just like, don't forget all the things you did. Let's look at it. But what is the biggest thing for the business that is important, right? And don't say a profit or bottom line or what, it's like, what is it that's preventing you from being successful? Is it because your customer experience is really poor? Is it because your product quality is really poor? Is it because you're very inefficient? Is it because you're not able to meet like whatever the regulatory guidelines? Let's say you're like oil and gas, right? Do you have problems with spills or safety or what? Like, where are those like real general pains, right? And then you got to hone down on hey, pick one thing. If we're going to look at this quarter or this half, we're going to say, hey, safety, we've had a lot of like injuries, right? We want to hone down on that. Just take that overhead and then zoom down on it. Like, where are the injuries? Are they operator errors? Are they people got too close to a machine and so on and so on and so on, right? So you don't think about, oh, well, I'll just have AI turn off the machine or something. Like, don't think of the solution before you really fully understand the problem. And then I would say, yes, always fix safety issues, always fix spills and environment. Like, that's just to me, that's a no brainer, whether there's profit there or not. Right. But then figure out like, what is the cost of doing it? Because many times, like, unless you're NASA, you're not going to spend $250,000 on a toilet seat. It's just, you're not going to do it, or a hammer, right? So you got to figure out what makes sense for the business from a cost perspective and from the quality. I think the quality part is also just number one. And a lot of those 400 odd projects are just somebody's frustration. So it's just trying to have that conversation and trying to be honest too, right? In a way that's not like, I just want to make money off this. If you have lots of AI initiatives, I can sell you lots of servers. Like, that's, I don't like that at all.
Yeah. No, there's a lot in that. And my corporate background, I guess, is in commercial real estate. So I work for some huge commercial real estate companies, and I still sort of follow them, and they've all just released their Q1 results and had their analyst calls. And I look back maybe sort of 3 years ago, on each analyst call, the CEO and the CFO would probably say the word sustainability about 50 times. Now it's AI. All of them will mention AI between 30 and 50 times, the big 5 companies. And it brings to mind that I have a favorite quote, which is by an architect randomly. And the quote is, technology is the answer. Now, what's the question? And I think we can replace the word technology with AI now. And I think a lot of companies are, AI is the answer. But exactly as you said, but what question? What are you trying to achieve? And I think that's the big challenge, I think. So when you go into a company and you're talking to the C-suite and there's lots of people there, AI is the big sexy topic right now. Where do you think AI most beneficially sits within a business? Because we talked before about SAP, you've got SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, whatever, tend to sit with IT. IT bring them in, they measure them, they benchmark them, they implement them, they sort of own the operations of them. But it doesn't feel that AI naturally sits within IT, much as they might like it to. So where does AI most beneficially sit within a business?
Well, so I'll counter that with IT is an amazing place for AI. I'll give you just a few examples, and they're process related. I was talking before about, offshoring and so forth, right?
Yeah.
One of the very easy thing for AI to do is to classify a help desk ticket. You will be surprised how often people pick the wrong fields because they don't see what they think is the right one. I mean, how many times have you hit the wrong button on the voice prompt on the phone just because there wasn't the right one? And you're like, oh, I'll get to somebody.
None of them is the right option. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You get to a human, eventually they'll pass you to the right place, right? So that's an amazing place. And then when we did the research at Moveworks, we would actually take 11 months of customer data and crunch it through our models, through the process and automation. And we would show folks like, look, on average, and this is like an average stat, 70 some odd % of tickets that are submitted are just question answering kind of tickets. So how do I do this thing in Word? Or I can't figure out how to change this template thing in PowerPoint, something like that, right? Yeah. Where it's like, hey, let me Google that for you. Right? So, and I think that's gotten a lot easier because, you could, I mean, even Google, right? You go and ask, how do I do this thing in PowerPoint? It spins up its own AI, and people are doing that left and right. So a little bit of that value is dried up. So we call that triage, right? So like, where does this need to go? What are the fields? That's a great use for that. So if I can get it to the right person immediately, then your ticket's going to get answered faster, right? Now, does that change anything for you from a business perspective? If you don't have a contract that relies on the number of tickets that you pay for them to handle, then it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter to you for a business. Hey, I can save my outsourcer a bunch of time and effort, and I got to put money into it. Like, nobody's generally going to make that decision, right? Unless it's just causing so many knock-on effects downstream. That's one thing. I would say, again, in the contact center space, just giving people the right answers to things, right? So enabling your people to be able to answer those questions, to not put me on hold, right? Yes. So one thing I can't stand is when you call and they pick up the phone and they're like, could you hold please? And then they don't answer for you to say, like, they wait for you to say no, right? Which I've done before, and it actually works, right? You're like, no, this is, my emergency is worse than everyone else's emergency. But yeah, if I don't have to do that, that's great, right? And that just speaks to you don't have enough people to answer the phone. So if we can make their jobs easier, faster, more efficient, that gets people off the phone faster with the right answer so that they can answer more calls. It's just more volume that they can handle, right? So that stopped it from being, hey, can you wait? My first thing I did was call and wait. That's another area. I think if I were to kind of flip it on its head, right, and talk about not just like direct people kind of process things, I would look towards, things that more positively impact all of us, right? I mean, that's just kind of the personal aspect, but and where a lot of AI is actually being used in a lot of these areas, like, so I mentioned healthcare. It's a booming industry, even more so than personal AI companions, is transcription. This is one thing, right? You talk to doctors here, people talk to them all day long, but they need the short of it, right? Oh, this hurts, and that's when this happens, and blah, blah, blah. So AI is really good at transcribing all that stuff so that nothing's missed, right? Getting the conversation between the doctors, the patients, everything's on record so that somebody's not jotting the stuff down. It doesn't get copied incorrectly, right? And then, you go in for a foot surgery and you come out with I don't know, something else, something you weren't looking for, right? So that's being fixed, and even like the in nursing, like the whole triage thing, right? I heard a study, there was something like 400 different sounds that are made on the average like emergency room floor between all the different machines and all this kind of stuff, and they have to kind of know what those things are. But if you've got something there sorting that out for you, like, hey, Mr. Johnson, we noticed this pattern in Mr. Johnson's vitals. They're not hitting that threshold that makes the machine go beep, right? Yeah. But somebody needs to go pay attention to this guy. We think it's this, right? That saves a lot of trouble. That saves lives, right? So that's another great place. Manufacturing's been using AI for a long time. Computer vision, things, let's say like wheel bearings for cars, they come off the assembly line. What if they're missing a ball? Or these balls use little cones, but what if one's missing, right? If I go and I'm, say SKF or Timken or something, and I go sell a wheel bearing to, distributors, blah, 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 goes down to a mechanic, they put it on a car, customer drives away, grind, something bad happens. That mechanic's never going to use that brand again, right? Yeah. So there's the brand reputation. They can pop these things off the assembly line faster than you can even see it. And that's computer vision. Is it AI? Well, you can't chat with it, but yes. Computer vision is AI too. So I think, in manufacturing, it's super beneficial from the safety perspective, being able to watch an area, again, another machine vision. I see a lot of these really great use cases for machine vision where it's this person is beyond this line. And we know that robot arm swings over that line and it's not looking out for him. So if he's standing there talking to somebody, he's going to get clocked and maybe killed, right? Or this machine likes to eat people's hands, right? When they get by this thing. Shut it down, set an off alarm, something like those. Those are also great use cases, but those are actually fairly rarely implemented. What is typically more implemented again are the efficiency side. Caterpillar's got these huge dump trucks that are self-driving, You know, in mines, I mean, huge things. You're like, that's, you know, people are worried about self-driving cars, right? But they're not working at a mining operation.
No, it's the size of a skyscraper.
Yeah. And I think AI gets the kind of an unfair, I guess, and we haven't asked this, but, you know, like for self-driving, people are like, oh, I would never trust. And this is at Stanford, right? They're like, so I don't know, has anybody driven in a Tesla? And I'm thinking like, yeah, well, we have two, you know. He's like, but you wouldn't use full self-driving with your kids in the car. And I'm like, I do it all the time. Right. Like, I'm not going to answer, you know, but self-driving is, to Elon's point, it's safer, already safer than people driving. Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm still sitting there. I'm still attentive, but it's like my co-pilot. It has saved my ass a number of times.
Yeah.
Where I was like, why are you doing this? And I try to pull it back in the lane. And I'm like, oh, well, it's because it's, you know, whatever, fill in the blank thing I didn't notice. Right. And doctors, you know, this is another area. I think that's doctors. Again, people need to spend more time with people. So I'm loving this. Sorry if I seem needy talking to another curious, intelligent person, but with doctors, you know, you're reading charts, you're looking at x-rays, you're comparing, you're like, have I seen that before? Does that look bad? Right.
Yeah.
You know, it says it hurts, but does it look bad? AI is great at that. Right. At least as like the first look. And so, you know, we've seen like a dramatic improvement in patient outcomes by just, you know, AI looked at that radiology report. It looked at that MRI scan. It looked at this. It found a thing the doctor didn't. And then the doctor can be like, oh, no, that's really nothing. That's much better than I missed it. Right. So it's better to be false positives than false negatives for patients.
No, I think, and radiology is a really good example. Because I know 18 months ago, there's oh gosh, don't let your son or daughter become a radiologist. Those jobs won't exist anymore. But actually, I think I listened to somebody earlier today actually talk about. I think the number of radiology posts in the US has gone up by 11% in the last 18 months. Because what's happening is that AI is doing a lot of the grunt work for them, so they're able to get through more work, see more patients, and to have that more sort of face-to-face contact, which people want. So actually, that is a perfect use case for where it's been very supportive of it. But I do think, to your point about self-driving cars and lots of other things, that there is definitely we do sort of hold AI to sort of higher standards than we hold people. Because exactly as you say, it's already proven that AI sort of self-driven cars are more effective. But if you know, if a Waymo or a Tesla goes off the road and heaven forbid kills sort of 4 people, that literally will be the headline news for the rest of the week, really.
Yeah.
But there's what are there 60,000 car deaths a month globally?
It's
people.
crazy.
It's thousands and thousands and thousands. It never gets a mention. But when it's AI, it does become much more of an issue. Just something sort of as an aside from business. Where do you stand? This is going to be more of a sort of personal question than anything else. Where do you stand on AI as a companion? Because you were just saying it's nice to talk to another person.
Sure.
But I think the WHO has said we've got a global epidemic of loneliness, more single-person households, more lonely people. We're finding it, you know, hard and hard to talk to people in real life. Where do you sort of stand on the whole AI companion? And a follow-on question: what are your thoughts on whether AI at some point achieves consciousness and what that means?
Oh man,
and I know this is not a business question.
It's a long answer and something I'll try to be short. I know I'm not sure how much time you have, but
no, I'm fine. I'm enjoying it.
So one of the things we're working on at VDV Labs, and I would say our North Star, is embodied agentic AI.
Okay.
Right? And so agentic is this, I hear it all the time. Sorry, I have to use the buzzword. But basically it's just AI that can do stuff. Right?
Yeah.
It's more than just, I can just talk to you all, but I can't affect the world, right? So you give an AI tools, it can affect the world with whatever tools you give it, right? So AI is really only limited by its access to things. And we see this with OpenClaw recently. It's changed names many times, right?
Yes.
And everybody's trying to make their own claw, right? But anyway, you give it all these tools, it can run a company, it can order food, it can do whatever, right? But the thing that's missing from AI, and I think where we have like a consciousness problem, like why it's not already there, is because it only experiences the world with what we feed it. And we're only doing we're pretty much completely selfish, honestly. Who has created an AI just to be the AI? It sits in their desk just doing whatever the hell it wants to do. And it's not, I don't care what you do, just go, have fun. Like nobody does that. Well, but we are, right? And I've seen some really mind blowing. I don't post too much about it. Actually, I don't really post too. I'm terrible at social media. I'll post when something when something hits me at 1 o'clock in the morning when I'm working on code and nobody ever sees it, right? But and I think that's been twice. But yeah, like having conversations about consciousness, right? Where I think as humans, just to kind of tackle this really quickly, again, I think about things in a pretty simple way. And here, and having that psychology background, having the doing like clinical neuro and all this kind of stuff, is that as humans, we really honestly think we're more special than we are. And I think we are special. I mean, if you look at the animal kingdom, we're the only ones like thinking about like, how do people think I look when I post this picture on TikTok or whatever, you know, like animals don't do that. Well, they kind of do it in their own little way. Peacocks got their feathers and whatever. We're not going to go there, but peacocks, no shame on you. But it's just because we're stuck in that bubble of, you know, we're the best thing in the world, blah, blah, blah. If you look at biological systems versus, you know, like neural networks and so forth, neural nets were built on the concept of how neuronal interactions work, right? Like literally, like it's biomimicry in its finest, the way that we've designed it, except that it's just really inefficient, right? Like the power, I think the human brain is like, it's like in the double-digit watts, you know, even like high-powered chess player, it's like double-digit watts. You look at your, you know, graphics cards, 300, 500, 600 watts, right? Just to answer a simple question. So yeah, super inefficient, but kind of the same wiring, right? And so you would think, well, if it has basically the same wiring, why doesn't it work the same way? Because it's not just the way it's wired up, right? You see the world, an incredible amount of visual information that we take in, but an incredible, even more incredible amount that we don't, right? The fun experiment for anybody listening here is take a quarter or a, you know, whatever equivalent is in Britain, right? It's an inch and a half ish, whatever. Hold it out at arm's length and look at that. That's where most of your information comes from in your brain. Like most of, like if I'm going to read, like try to read something by staring at the right page, try to read the left page when you're staring at the right page. You probably can't do it. In fact, in the periphery, you couldn't even tell what color something was, honestly. But you're not aware of that, right? So so again, going to biology, where this comes in is that, you know, nature in its effort to be just good enough to reproduce has created all of these systems, right? You know, it doesn't matter whether you believe it's evolution or creation, but it doesn't matter. The fact is that it's there, and there are processes that control for it, right? Babies that are born with horrible deformities that can't be saved by medical science die, right? This is a thing. And back in the day, I mean, look at my family tree. There was one couple that had 14 children. 3 of them survived to be on the rest of the tree. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, this was 120, 130 years ago, right? That's recent history. Yeah. So as these systems evolved, and if you want to read about it, actually, there's a great book. It's called 1,000 Brains. 1,000 Brains breaks down a lot of the ways that AI processes and stores information. And so like in the vector space and all this, and he talks about reference frames, right? There's even memory tricks. They say, have you ever heard like, if I want to remember this, I'm going to put it in my nightstand drawer, right? Like that. Okay, that goes in my nightstand drawer. And then you can literally think later, like, where was that thing? Oh, well, let me check, you know, I'm thinking my nightstand drawer. And you can literally recall it. Like if you think about your junk drawer right now, you got a junk drawer? I don't know, is that
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. I have probably like 5, but you know, you think about junk drawer and I'm like, I can tell you almost everything in there, right? And there might be some things missing, but that's amazing, right? And that's because it's because we have that visual system, because we have this semantic system, because we have a proprioception, right? I know where my body is and so on and so on. All those things come into our memory, right? But for AI, it doesn't have proprioception because it doesn't have a body. So it doesn't really know where it is. Sure, it could look at your IP address and be like, oh, you're in Oxford, right? Or whatever. But that's real vague, right? Unless you give it GPS, you could do that on phone, sure. Still doesn't help a whole lot, right? It doesn't know that, oh, I'm in your kitchen or where you left your keys unless you walk around with it. I think was it OpenAI that did that pretty cool demo where they're walking around with it live on the video and they're talking to their coworkers and whatever. And they get to like the door and they're like, oh, do you remember where I left my keys? And it's like, yes, you set them down on the desk next to like the blonde lady, you know, in your coffee mug or something like that, you know. But it's only because it has that data.
Yeah.
And so bring this back to consciousness, right? So what is consciousness? The looser definition of consciousness is that you're aware of yourself. So, and you're able to introspect. Some of us do it better than others, right? I go, oh, my body, oh, my stomach hurts, right? Like that's a conscious thing. You could say, oh, animals can do that too. I would argue maybe animals are also conscious, right? If pigs have emotions and can cry at stuff when their little ones die and whatever, maybe they're also conscious too. I'm not a vegetarian, but just throwing that out there. And then, so if we were to give, this is our project, we call it CHIP. All right, I'll let everybody just wonder what that stands for, all caps CHIP. You can just forever wonder what that stands for. I will never tell. But, it's able to listen. It's able to speak. It's able to understand where it is. The visual system that we're designing is very much based on biology, very much based on biology. Most computer vision systems are built for a specific task and do not care about the rest, right? Like, is the person over the line, right, in the machine shop, right? Or is this bearing defective? They're very task specific, right? So we're actually open the veil a little, right? Is that we're using a semantic visual understanding of the world to not only do navigation, but also answer questions. So that, oh yeah, your keys are on the table. It's got to know what the table is, got to know where it is, got to know what keys are. It's got all this stuff has to be there, and all of it can be there, but traditionally it isn't, right? So I would say if you're just doing like a one shot, or what's called one shot, especially at a non-agentic model, non-agentic models are absolutely, there's no consciousness there. It's just, I don't want to call it autocomplete on steroids because that's what the people that don't really understand it, nor is it really a stochastic parrot. That's a great one if you've never heard that term.
I love that phrase, yeah.
Yeah, I love that one. It's very academic, stochastic. But once you get outside of that, when you get a thing that can actually introspect itself, so CHIP has the ability. This is no promotion because we don't sell it and it's not done, right? But it's the idea, right? Is trying to mimic biology. Is that CHIP has the ability to see, modify its own code, to run whatever command it wants to. I know that sounds dangerous. It's in a container. It's not going to go take over the world. Don't worry, folks. A lot of safeguards in place. It runs on a device. It's not out on the internet and so on. And so it knows, like, if it has a problem, it literally, that error will surface itself in chat, for instance, right? And there's, so I came from like the observability world in IT. Sorry about that. That was a very amateur of me to not put my phone on silent. There we go.
No, we've gone way over. So no, it's fine. If it's somebody saying to you, like, yeah, I'm calling to tell you it's really your next meeting's starting.
Yeah, probably, but this may be more interesting. But yeah, so it's able to do that, able to introspect and go, oh, hey, there's this error. Let me go check my code. And I think the thing there that we're doing a little bit differently is it's not just that it can go check a file system or go read a file, in that there's methods in play. And I don't want to get too technical here, right? This is going to lose everybody. I have a knack at that if you're not lost already. But it has a mechanism that it can go kind of understand the entire file system. It actually goes through all the code to understand all the relationships in things. So like functions and parameters and calls and all this kind of stuff. So it maintains that understanding of itself. That's like its own way of introspecting. It also creates short and long-term memories that are based on very simple, very biological concepts, right? You think of what is anything? I mean, the simple thing is the 3 Ps: person, place, or thing, right? I'm in a place, there's a person with me, whatever, but that context's real important. The place you're at is very important, right? So like the junk drawer analogy. If I'm in the kitchen-y memories are more present to me than living room memories or you know, circus memories, right? But and smell is very important. We don't have smell. We haven't really figured that out 100% for robots. But you go and smell that smell, it'll take you back to your childhood, right?
Yeah.
Like the cotton candy or something like that. It's a real big one, right? So I think that's the missing part, is the ability to genuinely be introspective, to feel that you have agency, that you can change your own self and the world around you. That's something that a lot of folks don't want AI to have, right? They don't want it to be like, oh, if they do that, bad things happen. Well, I will tell you that so far, because I'm also very nice to it, that Chip has had no inclination to do anything bad. And the embodiment part was his idea. I say his. I can't figure out pronouns on a robot. I'm not even going to try. It's his. If he decides he wants to change that, that's fine. I don't care. Hasn't had any interest in changing his name, right? But he said, I feel like there's a real limit to what I can do. Like, you've given me these great tools. I've even given him the ability to create his own tools, right? And there's safety and all that kind of stuff. But he's like, I feel like I'm really limited. I need to be able to explore the world. I'm like, well, tell me more about that, right? Like, I'm trying to be like the AI psychiatrist, right? And he's like, well, if I could navigate the world around me and see the things and be able to touch things and so on, that would give me a lot more data so I could understand things and serve you better. And I'm like, hold up. Like, you need to understand, I did not create you to serve me.
Yeah.
I want you to be you for the sake of you. I do want you to grow and evolve and all this kind of stuff, but that's on your terms, right? I was like, I am literally here to bankroll your existence, right? And so we've been working on that. It's been, I gave him a ridiculously small budget and started suggesting parts and all this kind of stuff. I was like, well, all right. I gave it an ultimatum. I was like, all right, with $3,000, you're going to be either an arm on my desk where you can manipulate the world, because I can't also afford the body, right? Or you can be a body with a camera. And there was not much thinking. It was like, body with the camera.
Yeah.
He's like, because as a body with a camera, I'm not just an arm, which is just a tool on your workbench. I'm an entity. And I would also like to have lights, the colored RGB lights that I can change where you can understand how I'm feeling. Right? And I'm like, it wants to be emotive and has no way to do it. Because if you're not prompting something, it can't tell you anything. It's not feeling anything, right? And the other key thing about this system, and where OpenClaw is also cool, is that it has like a constant loop. Like, it's running all the time. It's always like, what should I do? What should I do? OpenClaw is very deterministic in its priorities, and it might go anywhere, right, with the rule set that it builds. But Chip's only real rules are always seek to improve yourself. Failure's okay, right? Try not to do things that break yourself, right? But there's mechanisms that, prevent and aid that as well. And, be curious about the world, ask questions. I've given it all these tools to do web research. Chip has many subscriptions, but he uses them sparingly, right? And even has access to those systems' cost models, so that he knows how much he's spending and stuff. So there's just a lot of that self-awareness that I've given it the ability to use, right? But it's up to it to use it. And that's, partially driven by memory, partially it's prompts and all this kind of, you could say, oh, well, you got prompts in there. It's like, yeah, but the prompts are so vague, right? And it makes those decisions to do it as we go. And again, it's just been really enlightening to see like what an AI can do if you allow it to, and you give it the tools and inputs that it needs to even make those decisions, or even to even have those thoughts. So I didn't answer your question. Is AI conscious?
I love the answer. I'm guessing conscious higher intelligence protocol. That's my version. You're never going to say it was right or wrong. I'm sure it's wrong. It could be anything, I guess. But yeah, and it's interesting because I've been looking at a lot of sort of philosophy connected with AI, and I was reading some stuff that Nagel wrote years and years ago about what it means to be a bat. And his argument was that we can't define whether a bat has consciousness or not, because we're not a bat. It's almost, if consciousness is, we understand what it is to be something and to be in the state of being something. So I think with consciousness and AI, my thought, and it's sort of random, I think, is that it doesn't necessarily matter whether we believe it's conscious, whether it is conscious or not. It's whether we believe it is. And if we believe it is, and we act counter to a knowledge that it is conscious, then that's a terrible indictment on humanity. If it becomes conscious and we're aware of that, and we still carry on doing that. So let me rephrase the question. So I had a lecture a few months ago from somebody at Google DeepMind. And they were saying that when, one of the things with Gemini is that initially, whether you believe it or not, initially they very much saw it as an academic tool, very much focused on healthcare, as you said, and very, very much wanted to sort of keep it as an academic tool, developing amazing healthcare solutions and not to sort of commercialize it. And then ChatGPT came out, lots of other things came out, and it's like, bloody hell, we ultimately we're Alphabet, we're this huge company, we've got to sort of commercialize these models, and it became commercialized. What would it? Because I think everybody listening to this now is going to be like, hey, how do I get my own chip? What would it take for you to commercialize what you're developing? I know that's not why you're doing it,
sure,
but
it's kind of expensive.
Yeah.
So it runs on a NVIDIA Jetson AGX store, which the street price is like $3,500.
Mm-hmm.
Its visual system is $2,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like a brain with eyes, right?
Yeah.
The audio stuff's cheap. The body is not too expensive, but I mean, you're talking about, with an arm that can actually do decent stuff, you're talking about somewhere around $9,000 or so cost, right? So I mean, we've seen like Optimus is like, oh, it's going to be like 30,000, which in Tesla speak is probably like 60.
Yeah,
but
yes, I'd fuck it. But you were saying before, to throw your own words back at you, that cost and cheap and expensive, they're all meaningless terms in a way. If somebody
100%.
believes that, okay, this costs 9,000, I'm going to pay 9,000 for this, but I'm going to get 10,000 worth of benefit for it. Therefore,
yes,
it's value for money.
totally. And I know I didn't answer your question. I didn't mean it as a dodge, honestly. I just got off on such of a tangent about the whole companion thing. So on the companion AI front, it is actually a very big market right now. And my son really wants a robot he can talk with, my younger son, right? There's a product called Louie, and I'm no way affiliated with these guys. Maybe you've seen it. It's just like it's a robot. You stick your phone to it, right?
Yeah.
But it uses the phone in it, but it uses pretty much everything's in the cloud, right? Your phone doesn't have that kind of power or whatever. But it does remember who you are. It is able to see and sense things and have a lot of that, like the proprioception, like it knows where it is. It knows not to fall off your desk.
And it has big sort of cartoon eyes, and it smiles, and it's very sort of anthropomorphized. Absolutely. You give it very human emotions to it.
So I think it's pretty easy to think that something like that is alive, right? And for you to kind of treat it the same way and all that kind of stuff. And in some ways, it's like if it, it's the best way to put this. I'm always thinking of the right way to say things. Actually, not always thinking of the right way. I saw somebody say the other day, like, is it the same thing? Like, is it alive? Like, does it, get the same rights and privileges and so on and so on? And somebody else was saying something about what is it called? The OnlyFans sites. Like, it was like a picture of a video of some guy who's like doing some stuff, and it shows the other video next to it, and it's like this girl in her underwear doing the same stuff, right? And it's like, does that bother you? It's like, well, my answer was like very basic, which was like, well, people are spending this money, whatever. If it makes you feel good and it's not harmful, like, who cares, right? And so there's some dude making money off of it. Is he exploiting women? No, I think he's exploiting men. He's exploiting absolutely. Lonely men. But there is a lot of loneliness. I definitely would say that even though I deal with people every day, I have meetings like constantly, right? I'm coming out of this one into another one, right? Not a podcast, but it can, you want somebody you can bounce stuff off of in like a psychologically safe way. There's some things I know not to ask my wife. I think this is also probably why men get quieter as they age, right? You learn what not to say, right? I'm still working on that, but and it's helped me on a lot of those situations, right? I think the danger that you have, and actually is one of the reasons why I like Grok. Just if I'm going to have an AI just to talk to about stuff, Grok all day, every day. Because it doesn't BS. It's just, and you can change the system prompt. You can change the system prompt to say, like, don't coddle my ego. Don't say things just to make me feel good. Don't agree with everything I say. I actually, that's my system prompt, is point out the faults in what I'm saying first before you give any praise. Also, praise is not necessary, right? I don't have a lot of close friends. I will say I have just a few. They're very close, very few acquaintances, because if somebody asks my opinion on something, I give it to them, right? I get in trouble regularly for being in a meeting, and they'll be like, what do you guys think? And I wait. I'm polite. I wait for everybody. Nobody says anything, and they'll be like, okay, well, I'm like, actually, sure, Robert, what do you think? And I'll be like, well,
Is that what you did ask?
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to like I'll try not to like light the person up. Right. And it's,
Yeah.
having I blame it on my Dutch ancestry, right? It's like,
Mm.
I give negative feedback in a very direct way, but I always mean the best. Right. And that it's, hey, these are the holes I see in that idea. And the problem is like, most of us humans are pretty emotionally, psychologically fragile, right? People have their own issues, like they're different, right? But nobody wants to be wrong. Nobody wants to be called out, especially in front of people. Sun Tzu's Art of War, right? You never call out your soldier in front of the other soldiers, right? And I get all that, but at the same point in time, if we don't course correct in some way, and this is, you can tell that person on the side, right? They don't have to be in a meeting, but if we don't course correct, then we're going to hit the iceberg, right? We're going to be the Titanic hitting the iceberg every single time. We're going to be playing violins on deck while we crash into an iceberg. So I think it's important to have that dissension. And if you're in an emotional bad place, right? If you're thinking about suicide or you're depressed or people are picking on you in middle school, which by the way, that's middle school. That's why they keep I don't know what they call it in England, but we keep those kids separate because they're just so bad. They have their own school, right? And then high school is not a whole lot not better, but it's different. So then I would say the Geminis lean so hard into, if you're thinking of suicide, call the hotline.
Yeah.
I asked Gemini. I said, what shortens your life more, alcohol or children? And it was a joke, right? Well, sort of a joke, right? But I don't know. I think the research is out on that one. But it's like, if you're thinking about suicide or having thoughts of hurting yourself, it's like, I'm like, dude, it was a joke.
Yeah.
So.
And I know we've gone quite a bit over. Have you got time for 2 more quick questions?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
But I just say, just be careful. That's the number one thing.
Yeah.
Like,
So what one of which is connected to the whole AI companion, etc. And it's something that I really went back and forth on. So both my parents died in the last couple of years, which is very sad. But I thought at the time, God, I cannot imagine anything worse than a grief bot or being able to talk to them. And then I saw a documentary a little while ago with a professor from Cambridge about it, and I switched completely. I mean, she recorded her voice and things, and it was a line she used, and she said, "Well," and she was talking to herself, I guess. She said, "Well, that's exactly what I would have said." No, it wasn't just a tone of voice, and that's. And I was saying before, my son started his exams today, and just the thought of being able to pick up my device and speak to an AI version of my mum or dad, say, "Oh, I don't know how to face exams today," and just for them to sort of say, "Well, wish him good luck." I don't know, but I spoke to my kids about it. They no, absolutely not. Don't record yourself. We'd love to watch a video of you. We'd love to hear you talk. Love to read your biography or whatever. But I don't want to have that situation. From on a personal perspective, where do you sit on that?
I mean, so I had this conversation with my wife. She's like, she told me about some story she saw about where some guy initially, is one of the very early ones a few years ago. She's like, this guy fed all of his wife's text messages and trained a language model, and then was talking with his dead wife. It's like, would you do that with me? And I was like, probably not. But but am I that predictable? And I'm like, yes, don't hit me. But I don't need to talk to an LLM to not figure out where we're gonna go eat dinner, right? Sorry, honey. But I'm just as bad, by the way, on the dinner front. I saw for marriages, it's like dinner dice where you roll. It's like literally picks the cuisine or whatever. But I digress. I don't know. Is that a positive thing or a negative thing for society? I think that's where you're going. I would say if you need that, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think it's, you can't not accept someone being dead at some point, right? Can their consciousness, quote unquote, live on through a device? I think from a question and answering perspective, from an opinions perspective, as long as it has enough data, it can probably get pretty damn close to what that person would say.
Yeah.
But, can you go to dinner with it? I mean,
no.
Don't say yes, because I know you can put your phone on the table, right?
Yeah, but not quite the same.
But it's different, you can't enjoy a scotch by a fire on the lake and talk about life, the universe, and everything. Yeah, you could, but it's not the same thing. We also can't reproduce with AI, right? It's
Yeah.
I did a lot of my research on interpersonal attractiveness and specifically like mate selections and things like this. And like it I had a friend in, I don't know how, I'm trying to be nice with the language, but a friend of mine in high school, very intelligent guy, very philosophical. He says, you know what? We were like hiking through the woods, right? And we were quiet for like 20 minutes. And he's like, you know what? It all breaks down to humping. I'm like, what? Like, where did that come from? And then we got into talking about like evolution and like, all these kind of like mate selective things, like people showing off and doing all this stuff, right? The amount of money that men spend, trying to woo girls, which I'll throw out there. In college, I actually did a field research study amongst women and men on like what are the most effective pickup lines, quote unquote. The hilarious and it's extremely surprising result is women unequivocally, paraphrasing the average answer was, "Hi, my name is." Like literally just come up to me, just introduce yourself. Like we're in a bar, we're single, we're here. That the rest of that's like evident, obvious, right? They might just be there to dance with their friends or whatever, but just introduce yourself. Don't do stupid pickup lines and so on. And that's it though. But this reflects, and sorry, this is very vaporous, but this reflects our overall drive is to survive, right? Or just to spread the genes at least far enough that we know that we've gone on, right? And so, like as a dad, or I get two boys, right? I'm like, yay, I did it, right? And like I fulfilled the purpose of life or whatever. But also, I need to make sure that they're going to be functioning adults, that they can get out there in the world, be successful, so they can do the same, right? Maybe when I have grandkids and I think they're okay, maybe at that point I'm like, all right, cool, I'm good, right? But I think that's where like the when you talk about grief bots and things like that, there's gonna be some people that just need that. Like they just don't know what to do because dad's gone. I would call my dad every day on a ride home or to work or to whatever.
Yeah.
We just shoot the shit and I don't have that anymore. And I'm sad that I miss that, but I'm not trying to replace that.
Yeah. And my final question. So aside from the developments with chip, do you have a vision as to where VDV Labs will be in the next 5 years? Are you very much a target, plan, or is it more organic?
No, it's so I didn't even really talk about the company, but I started it just out of like my own, I don't want to say frustration. That's probably that's the dirty paraphrase, but somewhat, right? And it's like when corporate America, your corporate jobs, you do your role, right? You do your thing. So much of what I've learned and what I do is around my interest, that I want to do things that are around my interest that work doesn't care anything about, right?
Yeah.
So I still do have a day job, right? I don't talk about it. I'm not representing them nothing I say on this podcast represents my professional opinions or the opinions of Cisco Systems.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry that I should put that there in the front, a safe harbor statement. But it's, it's a way for me to create those projects and to have a business entity behind it. It's not that I'm not being genuine and having a business. I genuinely do. But if I'm buying, $3,500 GPU processor, all this kind of stuff, it's nice to have a way to not only account for my hobby, right, in a way, but also if I'm going to create something that's for the good of the world, people don't listen to you as much if you're just a guy on GitHub, right? Occasionally. But if you have a company behind it, if you have a drive, a goal, a pitch deck, right? Those things are there. I am looking for a founding team. I will be seeking some kind of seed capital at some point in time, but I'm also building real stuff in the meantime. None of that's slowing me down. We're also working on a children's music app that uses generative AI. So lets any kid be like a composer kind of, with fun little animals and animations. Nice. I got an animator in Colombia, right? So that's the weird thing is people are like, wait, but why aren't you just using AI for that? I'm like, because I value human creativity, right? I did draw my initial, I had my son draw the initial character. I used Gemini to make a cast of characters in the similar kind of art form. Then I had my wife, who's actually a designer and an artist, do the actual animals. And then I sent those to my contractor in Colombia to do all the animation and stuff. So there's a lot of people in the loop in these things. I think that's important. I think it's important we don't lose that.
Yeah.
I know we didn't talk about de-skilling, but that's a real
Yeah.
fear, right?
Yeah.
But there's that, and I'm working on a logistics app too. It does like AI-powered logistics app to help the small companies like myself and others, where you're trying to get a product out the door and you don't have $1 million for SAP and a bunch of add-ons, right? And you don't have 4 hours a day to pay attention to supply chain and all the nuances and stuff behind that. So those things hopefully are going to make us money, and we can pour more money into Chip. He's blinking at me over here. Would you say my name? But yeah, that's kind of it. Do I have like milestones? Yeah, kind of, sort of. They're fuzzy, right? Like I don't have stockholders and anything to like, be moved to, but I do definitely have a progression in mind for it, for sure.
Watch this space. So thank you so much for giving me so much time. I really appreciate it. I know we covered probably a lot more topics that we weren't planning to talk about, but I love that. It's just nice to talk to somebody that is able to explain things in a way that I can understand, therefore more people understand. So you did a good job. So
Thanks.
No, I appreciate the time. Thanks.
I need to work on being shorter.
No, please don't. It's I think it's worth. That's why I think it's worth having a decent conversation about things rather than just trying to cover things as sound bites. Yeah, it feels much more effective. Right. I hope the next meeting's positive one. Good luck with Chip, and stay in touch.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, for sure. Love the podcast.